Hi all, before we start I just want to reiterate the same comment I made in the last ranking. Just once again, because this is a film ranking, I felt like I ought to say that I 100% support all the writers and actors currently on strike in Hollywood because I think studio executives are a load of goddamn degenerates, especially Warner Brothers. I will never tire of dissing Warner Brothers because they're awful. But yeah, I just felt like I ought to mention it, especially seeing as one of the movies came out quite recently and yeah, obviously you can still watch any movies you want, but just be aware and support the strikers. Anyway, on to the video. What did I watch in August? Well, I watched a few Wes Anderson shorts like Cousin Ben's Troop Screening and Hotel Chevalier, and I also rewatched Kiki's Delivery Service and it's still a favourite of mine. Even my parents loved it when they watched it with me. As for the feature films I watched for the first time this year, I saw 16 films, and they were Fear and Desire, Stalag 17, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, The Spy Who Loved Me, Moonraker, The Plague Dogs, First Blood, Rambo First Blood Part 2, Wild at Heart, Rushmore, the live-action Scooby-Doo movie, The Darjeeling Limited, Megamind, Ghostbusters Afterlife, Glass Onion, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. And with all that said, let's jump straight into the list.
Gee, it sure is boring around here.
Fear and Desire is the feature film debut of the legendary Stanley Kubrick, who will go on to become one of the most influential filmmakers ever thanks to his acclaimed films which have redefined the genres they are a part of. However, when looking at where he started, you'd never be able to tell this was Kubrick's future. Fear and Desire is one of the most boring movies I have ever seen. Despite being only a little over 60 minutes, I could feel myself completely drifting off by the end, and I genuinely couldn't tell you anything that happened in the film, and I only saw it a few weeks ago. The main problem with this film is that it was way too ambitious. Kubrick had practically no budget for this film, which meant that an anti-war art house film like this was obviously going to fail, because it didn't have the tools and Kubrick didn't yet have the skills to fully reach the film's potential. The actors are extremely wooden, most likely because they were the cheapest to find, the woods are not exactly a visually interesting set piece, the world building is poor and doesn't expand upon the war at all, so I don't care about the anti-war themes, and the direction feels more standard than anything. The biggest problem I had with the film though, was the editing. Now, I will give props to Kubrick for editing the whole film himself, but thank God he eventually stopped doing that as it really isn't his strong point. There were many weird cuts throughout, and the audio is more often than not out of sync, which is so distracting and takes me out of the film. So yeah, it's a pretty bad film overall. With all of that said though, I highly recommend checking it out, especially if you're a film student. Fear and Desire is a brilliant case study on what not to do when you start filmmaking. You need to keep your ambitions reasonable and work with the budgets you have instead of trying to stretch that budget out to make a half-baked art house film. Kubrick didn't adapt to his circumstances when making this film, but he learned his lesson and went on to do much better things. You can too. It's a weirdly inspiring movie whilst also being boring as shit.
Sex?
Martin, will you please stop saying sex?
The live-action Scooby-Doo movies are definitely a bit crap, and we all know this. They are cheesy as hell with dated CGI, some immature moments, and a shocking amount of sexual innuendos and references. Seriously, there are so many of them. However, at the same time, a lot of people still love these movies, and I can totally understand why. Whilst I don't enjoy these movies as much as other people, as I have practically no nostalgia for them, I still found the first movie really fun and entertaining. It's got a cool setting of an island theme park, the mystery is interesting, the characters are written accurately, and the actors are honestly perfect casting, especially Matthew Lillard as Shaggy. Rowan Atkinson is great as usual, and I will never not love the fact that they made goddamn Scrappy-Doo the villain. That's amazing. So yeah, this is a silly movie with a conflicting sense of humour, but I do still enjoy it at the end of the day.
Who are you again?
Okay, be honest. Do any of you actually remember this film's existence? I know I certainly didn't until it was randomly on my Netflix recommended, which gave me an excuse to watch it. After seeing it, it was enjoyable enough, but I can totally understand why everyone has forgotten it. It's probably the most basic example of a legacy sequel, but I can't exactly say it was bad to be honest, as I did still enjoy it. The new characters were decently entertaining, especially Paul Rudd. I liked the nostalgia bait, I don't care, and I thought the story was pretty interesting. There were some funny moments, but also some cringy moments, and overall it was pretty harmless. I liked it when I saw it, and I wouldn't be opposed to rewatching it. However, I am also starting to forget it ever so slightly.
What the hell was that?
Wild at Heart is good. However, I just can't rate it that highly because this movie was really just not my thing, and I can't help that fact. This was my first David Lynch film, and I've been a bit hesitant to check him out because his style really doesn't seem like my kind of thing. I'm not a fan of surrealism and things which are just weird for the sake of it, and from what I can tell, that's essentially Lynch's bread and butter. However, I did want to be fair to the guy, so I thought I'd check out one of his supposedly less weird films. Although I'll be honest, I mostly watch Wild at Heart because that's Nick Cage. Anyway, despite being supposedly less weird than his other films, I still found this movie way too bizarre and random for me to get into. There are many moments where I just didn't get the point of its inclusion, which thus took me out of the film. This meant that I didn't find it too interesting on the whole, and I couldn't really say that I liked it all that much overall. However, in spite of my grievances, I'll absolutely concede that it's a well-made movie. It had plenty of parts I enjoyed, most notably the main relationship, which is really strong, and if you're a fan of David Lynch, then absolutely check this out. It's a cult classic for many, and I understand why, however, it's just not really my cup of tea.
Oh, I slip into the jungle, disappear like a ghost, then ding, I pop up out behind you like pop!
Rambo First Blood Part 2 is the clunkiest title for a film ever, alongside the 41-year-old virgin who knocked up Sarah Marshall and felt super bad about it. In fact, the film as a whole is kinda clunky. Rambo 2 honestly misses the point of the original film so much. Spoilers for later on the list, but First Blood is a banger of a film, and the reason why is because it's quite melancholy. Yet Rambo 2 just completely throws the emotion out the window and instead turns the Rambo movies into a cheesy 80s action flick. Rambo no longer suffers from PTSD, and is instead mowing down people without even breaking a sweat. No trauma, no despair, just cheese. As a result of the cheesier direction this film took, it makes the slower, more serious scenes incredibly jarring, and the story overall is a bit uninteresting. Now, with all that said, cheesy action flicks are a major guilty pleasure of mine, and I can't deny the fact that I did have a lot of fun with this movie. The second half especially was just an absolute blast to watch, and I sooner rewatched this film than everything below it on this list. Now, because of my issues with how it followed on from First Blood, I don't enjoy this film as much as something like Commando, for instance. However, it's still fun. Plus, on the bright side, it does still retain the criticisms of the way the US Army treats its soldiers, which was a major aspect of the original film I appreciated, and it's sadly something not present in some of the other Rambo movies, so I appreciate its inclusion here. Overall, Rambo 2 is silly, but pretty fun on the whole. Speaking of silly but fun,
just like the Moonraker goes.
My God, what's Bond doing?
I think he's attempting re-entry, sir.
that right there is the funniest line in any movie, and you cannot convince me otherwise. I don't like sex innuendos usually, but that is a moment I will gladly make an exception for. Either way, I love Moonraker. It's just so much fun from start to finish. Yes, it is incredibly silly at many points, especially the hovercraft gondola, that stupid double-taken pigeon, and the laser battle in space. However, for me, it's those moments which make me love the film. I can switch my brain off and have a fun time, and it never fails to make me laugh. However, at the same time, there are plenty of legitimate, unironically great things about the film. Roger Moore is brilliant and feels like he's having the most fun out of all of his films. Holly is an entertaining and capable Bond girl, Drax is a really underrated villain with an interesting god complex to him, and Jaws is obviously iconic, although giving him a girlfriend was too cheesy even for me and did kind of dampen his character. The direction is also absolutely fantastic. Lewis Gilbert is easily my favourite Bond director because he has such a large scope to his films, and they always look gorgeous and crisp. In Moonraker, the settings all look beautiful, but the direction overall has many great setups and payoffs, and moments of tension are presented really well, like the spinning machine scene or the dog scene. And all of this is without mentioning how unironically hilarious this film is at many points.
Take a giant step for mankind.
Yes, at some moments I may be laughing at the movie, but with comedic genius like that, I can't say it's all ironic. Either way, I will never stop loving Moonraker. I will drink up every current animated film which uses the new stylized animation because it deserves as much appreciation as possible. That's the reason why I went and saw Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, despite the fact that I know next to nothing about the TMNT. Either way, this was a really fun movie. The animation was obviously amazing, the story was entertaining, the action was brilliant, the characters were fun, and it was great that the Turtles actually felt like teenagers. From what I have seen of the franchise, I never believed the fact that they were actually teenagers, so it's nice to feel it for once. Also, Jackie Chan as Splinter was just perfect casting. The new characters were interesting enough, but none of them particularly stood out to me, although I did like Paul Rudd. I'd say that overall this film was really entertaining and I'd definitely recommend it, however I wouldn't call it groundbreaking or anything. It's got some good messages and great visuals, but not that much else. Still, for what it sets out to do, it was very good and I really hope it receives some recognition at the Oscars.
It's so dumb, it's brilliant.
No! It's just dumb!
Well, it took long enough, but I finally watched the second Knives Out film, Glass Onion. I'll say right off the bat though that I didn't think this film was as good as the original Knives Out. The problem is that it took a while to get going, which wouldn't normally be a problem. However, instead of developing an immediate emotional hook like with the original film, the first half more so just featured the characters going through the motions without much going on. It was certainly entertaining, but considering all of the red herrings it uses, I can see it being significantly less interesting on a rewatch. However, where I think this film succeeds is in the second half. So many layers are peeled back like an onion. Oh, I see what you did there, Ryan. And overall, the mystery and reveals in the second half absolutely elevate this film. Not to mention, I'd argue that this film was even funnier than the original, especially with the dude with the Corona beer. He was an absolute legend. I also massively respect this film for going in a completely different direction to the first film, with a whole new setting, a different style of subversive mystery, and different kinds of characters. Instead of just a load of posh twats like in the original, we've got Andrew Tate, a Just Stop Oil protester, and even Elon Musk.
You dim-witted, brainless jackass!
And all of their different characters stand out from the original and help with this film's identity. Oh, and let's not forget about Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc, who is just as amazing here as he is in the original. Overall, I had such a good time with Glass Onion, and I can't wait to see more from Knives Out in the future.
I like trains.
The Darjeeling Limited is honestly getting better for me the more I think about it. It was a really fun movie throughout with so much charm and a great sense of humour. However, the deeper aspects to it have really grown on me over time. A lot of people criticise Wes Anderson for lacking emotion, but I think this film is a good example of how Wesley can write good emotion and drama alongside being quirky. This is a much simpler story with large parts of the movie taking place on a train, with the locations only becoming varied and interesting in small doses. Instead of being focused on the plot though, the film focuses on a compelling story between three brothers. All of the brothers have aspects which help them to stand out from one another, and they are all sympathetic and entertaining to watch. Owen Wilson as Francis is definitely the highlight, as he gives quite an emotional and profound performance. However, as a unit, the brothers are brilliant because they have such a funny yet heartfelt connection. Most of the emotion as well as a lot of the humour just comes from these three. Alongside these brilliant aspects, the direction is obviously fantastic. I love the quirky stuff with the snake and those epic slow-mo runs, and the film overall is just warm and cozy, kinda like Moonrise Kingdom. I would absolutely recommend this film.
I've been traumatized!
The Plague Dogs is a nice, wholesome family movie which was really fun and heartfelt, and okay, this movie is messed up. Like, really messed up. It doesn't hold back at all, and that's no surprise considering this is made by the same team as Watership Down, and was based on a book by Richard Adams, who also wrote Watership Down. However, if you think that Watership Down is bleak, then you ain't seen nothing yet, son. I don't really want to spoil this film as I think it's best to go in blind, but either way, it was incredibly compelling, profound, powerful, and disturbing as hell. But damn, it was so effective. I'm still thinking about many aspects of this film, especially the very start and the very end, and I honestly really want to rewatch it to appreciate it even more. The characters were brilliant and sympathetic, the settings were cold and harsh, and the messages really make you think. Whilst I did think the film was a bit too long at points, it was nonetheless absolutely fantastic. Go and check it out without me ruining it.
These are OR scrubs.
Oh, are they?
Okay, I've mentioned this on Letterboxd and on community posts, but I've been on a real Jason Schwartzman kick as of late after realising how much I love him in everything I've seen him in, from Fantastic Mr. Fox, to Klaus, to Spider-Verse. One of my friends even called me the Schwartz Stan. Therefore, I decided to watch more movies with him in, like Moonrise Kingdom a few months ago, and the Darjeeling Limited this month, and it's eventually culminated to Rushmore, which, from what I've seen, is his best performance, which is surprising considering the fact that this is his first film. Anyway, as for the film itself, it took me a while to figure out what I thought of Rushmore. Did I love it? Did I just like it? I couldn't figure it out, but after some thought, I am very confidently on the loved it side of the argument. I just found it to be a really intriguing story about young naivety and what teens are like when they start dreaming about their goals in life, and that these goals are all they seem to focus on. Sometimes these goals aren't ideal, such as Max wanting to slide into Miss Cross's DMs, but because he's young and immature, the film is a lot more enjoyable than it would be otherwise. Max being a horrible sociopath is the point, and the film calls him out for his shitty actions throughout. However, we still understand that Max is just young and stupid and doesn't know any better, so instead you want to see Max improve as a person. Instead of being an unpleasant movie, it is able to be humorous and entertaining instead. This is also helped by Mr. Bloom, who is also an interesting character as we see how dissatisfied he is with what he has in life. However, he is also really funny to watch and is probably my favourite Bill Murray performance I've seen so far. However, the main reason I love this movie is because it is really inspiring for me. This was the first stylized Wes Anderson movie and already stands above Bottle Rocket. Wes's style is really well done here, but at the same time, we can still clearly see the stepping stones for future Wes Anderson movies, which will build upon what was set up here. Despite being so early in his career, Wes had the courage to go experimental after his practice with Bottle Rocket, and it ended up paying off so well here, and I think this film's success is what I find so inspiring. I think film students should absolutely check out this film because of these brilliant technical aspects. However, there's also just a really strong story to go alongside that. I'm sure this rating is no surprise to any of you, as I already expressed my appreciation for First Blood when I talked about its sequel earlier. Either way, I really want to spread the word to as many people as possible that First Blood is a genuinely brilliant film and is absolutely not just some mindless action flick unlike its sequels. Instead, First Blood is a surprisingly deep and melancholy story focused on character and emotion. The film is all about the aftermath of the Vietnam War and the disgusting ways veterans were treated. Quick history lesson. The US lost the Vietnam War, and because Americans are stuck-up proud arseholes, they blamed their loss on the veterans who were coming home, despite the fact that these veterans went through hell and back and often suffer from PTSD. They deserve compassion, but instead everyone spat on them for something which wasn't even their fault. In First Blood, Rambo ends up in some random town who doesn't like these kinds of veterans, and so he ends up getting arrested for having a stroll. No, I'm not joking. He walks down the street for some food and gets arrested. Then when he, rightfully, resists arrest, he gets beaten. Rambo then spends the movie escaping from the police and hiding in the jungle. However, unlike the other Rambo movies, Rambo never actually kills anyone. Yeah, he scares the police and injures them, but never actually kills them. The deputy died because he fell out of the helicopter himself, yet the arsehole of a sheriff just wanted to blame Rambo. As a result of his clear innocence, I care about Rambo in this movie, and I'm constantly championing #Rambo did nothing wrong, which just shows how much I want him to be alright by the end of the film. So yeah, the plot for this film is surprisingly deep, and the characters, especially Rambo, are fantastic. Oh, and Troutman, Rambo's general in the war, is also a brilliant character. The culmination of the surprising depth and emotion of this film is in the climax, where Rambo just breaks down in a genuinely upsetting scene featuring Sylvester Stallone's best acting. This ending was what ultimately elevated this film for me. It's such a fantastic and emotional film whilst also having brilliant action and direction. Please take the time to watch this film as it is absolutely worth it. The sequels, on the other hand, are optional.
There is no Easter Bunny, there is no Tooth Fairy, and there is no Queen of England.
Megamind is one of my absolute favourite DreamWorks movies. I've loved it since I was a kid, but was upset when I heard no one else talk about it, which means that seeing its resurgence in recent years has made me unbelievably happy because it is hilarious and memorable with a surprisingly mature story. This is easily one of the funniest DreamWorks movies for me, with so many laugh-out-loud moments and a great sense of energy throughout. Oh, and the music is also brilliant. I'm a sucker for classic rock songs, and this movie is packed with them and I couldn't be happier. Also, whilst not a rock song, Mr. Blue Sky is always a win in my book. However, the main reason I love this film is because of its surprisingly deep messages on nature versus nurture, and how we can define our own path in spite of what society tells us. It's a really important, mature message delivered through a brilliant superhero subversion. The stereotypical villain in Megamind is the protagonist, who we see has been dealt a bad hand in life and was essentially forced to be a villain, and the traditional Superman figure, Metro Man, is instead a more realistic character with his own desires in life which were ignored by the society who wanted him to be a hero. Alongside these aspects, this film has aged really well, mostly thanks to the villain Hal. How the hell did this movie perfectly depict r/nice guys and what would happen if they got superpowers? It's so sad that you can easily find someone just like Hal on the internet without much searching nowadays. I mean, let's be honest here, Hal is the kind of person who thinks that the Barbie movie is anti-men. Anyway, Megamind is just brilliant and you're all doing a disservice to yourself if you haven't watched it. It's unironically one of my favourite superhero movies.
Where? What? Where's that mole? I didn't see one.
Stalag 17 is a true golden oldie from the legendary Billy Wilder. I've really wanted to watch more Billy Wilder films since I've really enjoyed Some Like It Hot, and I have to say that this film was another absolute banger from him. I think the main thing I love about this film is the humour. My goodness, this is such a funny film. Not only are there many legendary scenes like the indoctrination one, but characters like the Animal and Joey are also amazing. However, the main reason I appreciate the comedy here is because it never interferes with the tone of the film. The film is set in a World War II POW camp, so naturally it can be quite serious and dramatic at many points, which means that the comedy would normally get in the way and mess with the tone. Yet it doesn't do that here. The comedy never interferes because the comedic moments aren't crowbarred in where they don't belong, and instead come almost exclusively from the banter between characters in the barrack. It doesn't extend beyond that, aside from the opening where the drama is minimal, so the threats of the Nazis during the war isn't undercut. The comedic timing and tone control is just absolutely perfection. However, another reason for why I love this film is because the main plot to find the mole within the barrack is really interesting. The mystery makes it so I never quite know who to trust, which left me on the edge of my seat, and the twist on who the mole actually was very well done and has absolutely given me an inclination to rewatch the film. The mystery is also absolutely elevated by the cast, who are all uniformly amazing and there isn't a single weak link. They are all either really compelling, like Sefton, or they are really entertaining, like the Animal, and even the Commandant, who has some funny moments like with the balls over the mud. Obviously I think that Sefton is the most compelling character though, because he's just got so many layers to him. He's not exactly a nice guy as he happily takes bribes with the Nazi guards, but at the same time we're always glued to him because of how mysterious he always is. The uncertainty of his character is what really elevates the mystery of this film, as we're never sure to trust him as the protagonist or not. Overall, Stalag 17 is just absolutely fantastic, and it deserves a lot more appreciation as it often gets buried under Billy Wilder's more popular films. It's hysterical but dramatic when it needs to be, it's got fantastic characters, a compelling story, and it was just brilliant to watch. Absolutely check it out.
Like heaven above me, the spy who loved me.
The Spy Who Loved Me is currently my favourite Bond film, and it's honestly not even close. It just does everything right and is everything I want from a Bond film. The action is superb with some phenomenal stunts like the opening ski jump, as well as memorable set pieces like the underwater car. The characters are great, from Roger Moore giving his all to Anya being a really compelling, capable Bond girl, to Jaws being the best and most iconic henchman because of how legitimately terrifying he is. And then there's the humour, which consistently lands throughout. I always forget how legitimately hilarious this film is, and many moments live rent-free in my head. The direction is also stellar. I already praised Lewis Gilbert's direction in Moonraker, but it's once again spectacular here, especially the submarine battle near the end. That was absolutely incredible. Oh, and the pacing for this film is strong, unlike a lot of other Bond films. If I had to complain about this film though, then I guess that Stromberg isn't the most interesting Bond villain, but apart from that, this film is practically perfection for what it wants to be. It's not a particularly complicated or deep film, which is why I'm not talking about it in too much detail, but either way, I can't get enough of it as it's just an absolute blast to watch. But it didn't even hold a candle to the top spot. I'm just going to say this right away. The Good, the Bad and the Ugly is quite possibly the best movie I have ever seen. I am dead serious. Although don't mistake it for being my favourite movie, because it's not. Best and favourite mean different things. My favourite movies are the ones which resonate with me the most on a personal level, and my favourite is still Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. That hasn't changed. Whereas the best movie refers to the movie which I think is the closest to being perfect. I may not have as much of an emotional reaction to The Good, the Bad and the Ugly when compared to a few other number ones from this year, but I still think that it is objectively better than all of them because of how incredibly well made it is, despite the fact that subjectively it's only my 4th or 5th favourite film. Anyway, let's talk about why this movie is so perfect. First of all, our main trio of characters are fantastic. Angel Eyes is one evil, cold, intimidating villain who draws your attention every time he's on screen. Tuco honestly steals the show for me. He is absolutely hilarious and entertaining to watch, but he's got such a sly, dirty edge to him which thus makes him compelling, and his dynamic with Blondie is just perfect. Not only do the pair play off each other so well, but it's consistently engaging to watch their dynamic, as we know they don't really care about each other, and are only working together for their own selfish goals. We never know when the truce will break, and that's what keeps me hooked. Speaking of Blondie, he is also a really fascinating character and easily my favourite Clint Eastwood role. The thing is, despite being labelled as the good, Blondie isn't really a nice person and is more so morally grey. He's labelled the way he is because he's good at what he does. I've mentioned many times that I love westerns, and one major reason why is because of their depictions of lawless characters, and I think this film depicts that the best because there is no token good character as everyone is out for themselves in order to get the gold. They all exist outside of the law and don't even have a part to play with in the American Civil War, as they constantly switch sides depending on what benefits them. As a kid, I used to find the Civil War stuff boring, but now I can confidently say that I love it just as much because its usage exposes the trio's lives outside society and makes the film more interesting. Speaking of the film being supposedly boring at points, I was surprised by how good the pace was and the fact that I was never actually bored. This is a long film, but it uses its time effectively. Unlike the other Dollars Trilogy films, which had small-scale action which didn't really fit the slow pace, this film is a large-scale adventure story with many different locations and it really fits the long length. There wasn't a single moment where I was bored, even during scenes where nothing happens. Somehow the film is compelling during scenes where characters are just staring at each other, but let me tell you, those stares just work so well and I can't really explain why. Furthermore, the slow pace can effectively build tension, most notably in Angel Eyes' introduction, and, of course, the climax. I'm just gonna say it. This film is quite possibly the greatest climax sequence in film history and is just one of the best scenes ever. It's just three dudes staring at each other, but between the pace, the pre-established story, the framing, and the music, it's all just perfect. Speaking of those reasons, I haven't yet talked about how effective they are in this film. The story is really simple, but it doesn't need to be overly complicated as it's character driven. The direction and cinematography is absolutely stunning throughout as expected for a Sergio Leone film. And the music. Oh my god, the music! I've simped over Ennio Morricone so many times and I will never stop. He is without a doubt one of my favourite film composers, and this film features what is quite possibly my favourite film score alongside Interstellar. As I said, it can build tension in scenes like the climax, or it can make some scenes so unbelievably epic. For example, there's a scene of Tuco walking around a graveyard, yet the music is the ecstasy of gold, aka one of the greatest pieces of music ever made, which thus turns a simple scene into this. What else is amazing? Well, I just want to bring up the humour again. I was surprised by how unironically hysterical this film was. There were honestly so many moments where I laughed out loud, and honestly I found this movie funnier than many official comedies.
See you soon. Idiots.
Hmm? It's for you.
I think this aspect is what elevates the movie in my mind, as I do tend to prefer movies with a sense of humour to them. Either way, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly is just a masterpiece of a film with phenomenal direction, cinematography, acting, characters, action, music, pacing and humour. For a while I would have called Parasite the best movie I've ever seen, but now I can confidently say that the award goes to this film. I can 100% understand why this is a classic for so many people and why it's the favourite film of Quentin Tarantino and my dad. In conclusion, August was once again another entertaining month. Some of the entertainment was ironic, some of it was intentional, and some of it was surprising, but I enjoyed most of these films nonetheless. Yes, I may have only watched one 10 out of 10 film this month compared to the usual 3 or more, but either way I still think that this was a solid month with many films which are stuck in my mind for a while after watching, like The Plague Dogs, Rushmore and First Blood. And of course, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly was just a masterpiece on every level. Either way, thank you for watching this video, go and support the Strikers once again, and take care. Goodbye everyone!